You don't look like you belong here." That was the first thing Bryce Calloway said to Simone Oduya Fletchers when she walked through the front doors of the Ridgewood Club on a Tuesday afternoon in late September. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't look around to see who was listening. He just said it, the way someone says close the door behind you, or the kitchen closes at 9. Like a policy, like a fact, like she was supposed to nod and turn around. Simone was 28 years old. She was wearing dark jeans, white sneakers, and a gray zip-up hoodie with the Dalhousie crest on the chest. She had a messenger bag over one shoulder and a paper coffee cup in her hand. She looked exactly like what she was. Someone who had just driven 4 hours from Halifax, who hadn't slept particularly well, and who had no patience for whatever this was about to be. She stopped walking. She looked at the man behind the reception desk, mid-50s, silver hair swept back, the kind of jacket that said, "I manage things," without specifying what. And she tilted her head just slightly. "Sorry? This is a private facility," Bryce Calloway said. He had folded his hands on the counter. He was smiling. That was somehow the worst part. Members and invited guests only. "I know," Simone said. "I have a reservation." The lobby of the Ridgewood Club was exactly what you'd expect from a property that had been operating since 1987 on 200 acres of Nova Scotia lakefront. Dark wood paneling, oil paintings of men in hunting gear, a fireplace big enough to stand in. The kind of place that smelled like cedar and old money and had never once felt the need to apologize for either. A few people were scattered across the lounge chairs near the windows, an older couple with cocktails, a man in a blazer tapping at his phone, a woman reading a magazine who had very clearly stopped reading and was watching the front desk instead. Bryce took his time typing something into his computer. Then he looked up. "I'm not finding anything under." He paused. A little theatrical. What was the name? Oduya Fletcher. Simone. Another pause. Another performance of scrolling. "I'm not seeing that here." "Try under Fletcher Properties," Simone said. "My father's company holds the booking." Bryce's expression didn't change. That practiced neutrality that wasn't quite neutral, the kind that let you say I was perfectly polite afterward, while everyone in the room knew exactly what had just happened. "I'll need you to step aside while I verify," he said. "We have members arriving." There were no members arriving. The front drive, visible through the glass doors behind Simone, was empty. She stepped aside. She found a chair near the window. Not because she was told to, but because she'd been driving since 7 in the morning, and her lower back was informing her of this fact. She set her coffee on the side table and pulled out her phone. She did not look anxious. She did not look uncertain. She looked like someone waiting for a delayed coffee order. This is the part where most people would second-guess themselves, where the silence and the eyes, and the subtle performance of "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" would start to do its work. And maybe that's what Bryce Calloway was counting on. Because in the 31 years he'd been managing private clubs, first in Ontario, then in New Brunswick, the last 12 years at Ridgewood, it had always worked, not perfectly, not always cleanly. Simone texted her father. "Front desk guy is giving me a hard time. Just FYI." Her father, Dr. Emeka Fletcher, responded in under a minute. "Of course he is. Don't do anything I wouldn't do." She sent back a single emoji. He knew which one. Bryce spent 11 minutes at his desk. Simone watched him without appearing to watch him. He made 2 phone calls, kept his voice low, glanced over at her twice. The second time, a younger staff member. A woman in her 20s, dark ponytail, slightly anxious expression, came out from a back office, looked at the screen, whispered something, and then looked at Simone. Then she looked back at the screen. Then she went very still. Bryce did not notice. He was already walking back around the counter. "Ma'am," he said, and the ma'am was doing something, some little piece of condescension tucked inside a word that was technically respectful. "I've checked our system thoroughly. There's no reservation under that name or that company. I'm going to have to ask you to Kayla." The young woman from the back office had followed him out. Her voice was careful. "Can I talk to you for a second? I'm handling it," Bryce said, without turning around. "Bryce, quieter now. More urgent. I really think you should. Kayla." He turned then. His voice had gone flat. "I said I'm handling it." Kayla Birch, who had worked at the Ridgewood Club for 3 years, who knew every member by name, who had processed more paperwork than she could count, and had a very clear memory of processing a particular transfer of ownership document 14 months ago, pressed her lips together and took a step back. She didn't leave. She stood there. She was shaking a little, if you looked closely enough. Not from fear exactly, from the particular frustration of watching someone walk, very confidently, directly off a cliff. Bryce turned back to Simone. "As I was saying, this is a members-only facility, and I'm not able to accommodate walk-ins, regardless of—" "I'm not a walk-in," Simone said. Regardless of how the visit was arranged, he was talking over her now, smooth, practiced, the voice of someone who had done this before and expected it to end a particular way. "I'd be happy to provide you with information about our membership application process, which does have a Mr. Calloway." He stopped. Simone had stood up. She wasn't tall, 5'4", maybe 5'5", but she had a way of occupying space that had nothing to do with height. She'd had it since she was a teenager, her father always said. That quality of being completely, absolutely present. "My name is Simone Oduya Fletcher," she said. "My father is Dr. Emeka Fletcher." 14 months ago, Fletcher Properties Group completed the acquisition of the Ridgewood Club and its surrounding land from the Hargreave family estate. The transaction was filed with the Nova Scotia Registry of Joint Stock Companies on August 14th. My father is the majority stakeholder. I am the co-director of operations, which means that this building, that desk, and that computer you've been typing at for the last 11 minutes, all of it belongs to my family. The lobby had gone very quiet. The woman with the magazine had put the magazine down. The man in the blazer had stopped tapping his phone. The older couple near the window had turned, almost in unison, to look. Bryce Calloway had not moved. His expression was doing something complicated and not entirely successful, trying to hold its shape while everything underneath shifted. He started. "I drove from Halifax this morning." Simone continued, "Doing a facilities review this week. I had a reservation under Fletcher Properties that your system apparently couldn't locate, which is something we'll want to look into. And I've been sitting in that chair for," she glanced at her phone, "14 minutes. Which is fine. I don't mind waiting, but I do mind being told I don't look like I belong here." She said that last part, simply, not with anger. Something quieter than anger, and somehow harder. "Because I want to be very clear about what that means, Mr. Calloway. It doesn't mean I'm not a member. It doesn't mean my reservation isn't in your system. It means you looked at me when I walked in and decided, before I said a single word, that I wasn't supposed to be here. And that is a very different problem." Kayla had her clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield. Bryce opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Mrs. Fletcher," he said. "I assure you that was never my—" "Do you know who the general manager report to here?" Simone asked. "A beat. Currently," he said. He sounded like a man who had just realized the ground under him was not ground at all. "To me. I'm the general manager reports to the director of operations," Simone said. "Which, as I just mentioned, is me." Another beat. "Longer. I think," she said. "We should go to your office." What happened in that office over the next 40 minutes was not recorded and not repeated in detail here. But what came out of it was this. Bryce Calloway, who had managed the Ridgewood Club for 12 years, who had been given a generous contract and a generous salary, and had been trusted to maintain the standard and reputation of a property that had just undergone a significant change in ownership, handed in his resignation before 5 o'clock. He didn't have to. Simone didn't demand it exactly, but she laid out, methodically and without drama, what she had observed in the previous hour and what it meant for the club's operations and its obligations under federal and provincial human rights legislation. She spoke the way someone speaks when they have been taught their whole life to make their case so clearly and so thoroughly that the other arrives. Dat. Bryce arrived at the conclusion himself. Bryce, he cleaned out his desk. He shook no one's hand. He walked out through the side door, past the cedar hedge, into the parking lot. The older couple at the window watched him go. The man in the blazer went back to his phone. The woman with the magazine did not pick it back up for a long time. Kayla Birch knocked on the office door 20 minutes after Bryce had left. She was holding a printed document. Her ponytail had come slightly loose. She looked exhausted in the way that people look when they have been holding something carefully in place for a long time and have just been allowed to set it down. "I pulled the original reservation," she said. "It was there the whole time. Filed under Fletcher Properties Group. Holdings. He would have found it if he'd searched the right field." She paused. "I tried to tell him." "I know," Simone said. "I saw." Kayla nodded. She set the document on the desk. "Is there anything you need? From me, I mean. For the review." Simone looked at her for a moment, the kind of look that takes a person's measure, not harshly, but honestly. "Can you walk me through the staffing structure?" she said. "Start from front of house and work back. And I want to see the incident log for the last 18 months, if there is one." "There is," Kayla said. "I'll get it." She was at the door when Simone spoke again. "Kayla, for what it's worth, speaking up the way you did, even when he shut you down, that matters. I noticed." Kayla Birch didn't say anything for a second. Then she nodded, once, and her shoulders dropped about half an inch. "I'll get the log," she said. Dr. Emeka Fletcher arrived at the Ridgewood Club the next morning. He was 61 years old, originally from Enugu, had built Fletcher Properties from a single apartment building in Dartmouth into a portfolio that included commercial properties, a marina, 2 boutique hotels, and now a private club on a lake in Nova Scotia. He wore a dark coat and carried his coffee in a thermos and moved through the lobby with the particular ease of a man who was never in a hurry, because he had learned, decades ago, that things moved at the speed they moved, and that was that. He found his daughter in the dining room with a stack of files and a half-eaten plate of eggs. "How was the drive?" he asked, sitting down across from her. "Long," she said. "The review is going to take the rest of the week. I know." He poured himself a coffee from the thermos. "How are you?" She thought about it for a moment. That was a thing about Simone. She actually thought about questions before she answered them. "Fine," she said. "I'm fine. It was just." She looked at the window. The lake was flat and gray-blue in the morning light, the birches along the far shore just beginning to turn. He didn't even hesitate. That's the part I keep thinking about. He looked at me and didn't even hesitate. Her father was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, "he wouldn't have." "I know." She looked back at her eggs. "I know. I'm not surprised. I just..." She stopped. Started again. "I wanted to be surprised." Dr. Emeka Fletcher put his thermos down. He looked at his daughter the way he had looked at her since she was small, with a very specific kind of attention, the kind that says, "I see you, specifically, and not just the situation you are in." "You handled it exactly right," he said. "I know. You made him understand without making it ugly." "I know. Most people, Dad." She smiled. "Just slightly. I know. I was there." He laughed. It was a quiet laugh, the kind that lived in the chest and didn't need much room. "Eat your eggs," he said. By the end of the week, Simone had completed the operational review. She had sat down with every department head, walked every room, read the incident log front to back. She found 3 other entries in the past 18 months that concerned her, and she flagged them all. She worked 16-hour days and slept in one of the guest suites, and drank too much coffee and called her mother twice, and felt, by Friday afternoon, like she had lifted something very heavy and set it down somewhere better. She also promoted Kayla Birch to interim front desk supervisor, pending a full recruitment process for the general manager role. Kayla found out by email, because Simone had a meeting she couldn't move. But when they passed each other in the hallway that afternoon, Simone heading toward the parking lot, Kayla coming out of the staff room with a binder under her arm. Kayla stopped her. "I wanted to say," Kayla started. Then she seemed to run out of words for a second. "I've been here 3 years. And I've had a file on my desk, a running file. Things I'd noticed, things that didn't sit right. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know who to give it to." "Give it to me," Simone said. "I already emailed it." Simone nodded. She pulled her keys out of her pocket. "Good," she said. "That's exactly what you should have done." She drove back to Halifax that evening. 4 hours on the 104, the sun going down somewhere behind the clouds, the highway rolling through spruce and granite, and the particular emptiness of the Nova Scotia interior that she'd always found either bleak or beautiful, depending on her mood. Tonight it was beautiful. She thought about the look on Bryce Calloway's face when he'd finally understood. Not the shame, she didn't particularly want to dwell on that. But the moment just before it, that half-second when the entire shape of what he'd assumed was visibly rearranging itself. When reality declined to be what he'd decided it was. She had seen that look before. She would see it again. That was not a pessimistic thought, just an accurate one. The world was full of men like Bryce Calloway, men who had never once been asked to question the very first impression they'd formed, who had moved through decades of professional life with their assumptions perfectly intact and perfectly unchallenged. But the world was also full of Kayla, Birches, people who noticed. People who tried to say something even when the person they were talking to refused to listen. People who kept a file quietly, on their own time, because something told them it mattered even when no one seemed to care. That was worth something. That was worth quite a lot, actually. Simone stopped for gas outside of Truro. She stood in the cold for a moment after she'd replaced the nozzle, looking up at the sky. A few stars were visible where the clouds had thinned. Her phone buzzed. Her father. "Good week." She typed back. "Not bad." A pause. Then, "Proud of you." She didn't respond to that one. She didn't need to. She got back in the car and drove the rest of the way home through the dark, and the road was hers and the night was quiet. And she had exactly as much to prove as she'd always had, which nothing, and which was everything, depending on who was asking. Some people spend their whole lives trying to make themselves legible to rooms that were never nice enough to read them. And some people, eventually, decide that the room's inability to read them is the room's problem to fix. Simone Oduya Fletcher had decided that a long time ago. The Ridgewood Club was just the latest room to find out.